Hello and welcome to Engineering Mastery Academy's training on visual work instructions or visual method sheets. I'm your host Brian Wood. This is day 2. Today I'm going to be going over some preliminary steps you should go through before you even start working on method sheets. So you should, give me a moment here. There you go. So what I'm showing on the screen right now is the worksheet, which I was trying to post, didn't quite get posted yet. It'll be posted after I'm done with this session. What we're going to be going over today is selecting the product to work on, and then selecting the documentation format. I'll be going into much more detail on documentation format in later trainings. But for now, I want to go into selecting the product. And you're going to watch me real time fix this sheet. If my keyboard will work. Okay, I'll fix it later. So selecting the product. First of all, I'm not going to be going over FMEA during this. It's a completely different subject. But if you're familiar with FMEA, failure mode effects analysis, it's a way of measuring the magnitude of problems you have, your ability to address those problems as they come up or before they get to the customer, and then the impact if they get to the customer. If you have something like that available, that's great. Absolutely use that when you're selecting the product. Even if you have that, you might have 10 different products in FMEA on all 10 products. FMEA alone is not necessarily the best tool to use to decide which product you should be focusing your efforts for creating visual work instructions. So I came up with the following calculation relatively quickly, but it's based on years of experience, and without actually putting numbers to it, it's the factors that I've considered most often when choosing what to work on. So as I go through this, recognize that you might have other factors you want to figure into this equation, and also some of these might not be as relevant in your situation. But to try to give everybody a starting point for figuring out their own way to get quantified data suggesting what to point to what product to work on, here's what I look at first. I look at the product life remaining. Is it at the end of life, meaning they're not going to be selling anymore, which would be a 0 score, all the way up to you're going to be selling this product for as long as you can see, which would be a 5. So the first one would be scored 0 to 5. An example of a 0 that I ran into, marketing came in and said, marketing or sales came in and said, hey, we've been having a lot of issues with this product. We really need to work on the method sheets and make it better. And my boss looked at them and said, we've got 3 more of these to ship. How much effort do you really want us to put into 3 more products? Right? He wasn't quite as crude as that, but that was basically the story. So we did not work on that despite the problems it was having, despite the fact that they were getting to the customers, because we were obsoleting the product. Secondly, you want to look at what percentage of the business is it? Using that same example, we're selling 3 more of that product where we're selling tens of other two different other products. The amount of business left in those last 3 products did not justify us spending large numbers of engineering hours trying to improve documentation on it. Even if that product had been something that we were going to continue shipping, if we're only doing 3 a year, the fact that it's got might have had the most problems on it is not the only factor to consider when you want to consider your efforts in working on method sheets. Now, when I'm talking about all this, keep in mind, I'm not saying don't address problems on other products. You always want to address problems when they're coming up, but by the time I'm done with this training, I think that you will be ready and you'll be energized to, I hope you are energized, to actually go out and create new method sheets, to reimagine the method sheets you have, or if you're starting fresh, then actually getting into the process of creating method sheets for the first time. So if you got one product you're selling 3 a year, and you've got another one you're selling 100 a year, meaning the process is being done 100 times a year versus being done 3 times a year, it might make more sense to work on the one that's being done 100 times a year, even if the one that's done 3 times a year is worth 100 times as much. You know, it's a balancing act. It's looking at all the parameters. Again, I'm giving you a few very top level parameters. If you find other parameters you think should be involved in the equation, by all means, you can hit me up and say, hey, how should I fit this into the equation? Or you can simply post out there saying, hey, I added this to the equation and it made a much better choice. We're all learning here together. Again, this is based on my experience. You have your own experience. And I'd love to get as much feedback for the group and for myself on everybody else's experience in this. So what percentage of the business is it? If it's less than 10% of the business, I give it a 1. If it's greater than 70% of the business, I'll give it a 5. If it's somewhere in between, then you figure, 2, 3, or 4. What percent of your headaches is it? For example, this would be measured in different ways. You might measure the headache as in, when I have a problem, it takes me 2 days to address the problem. Or it might be, well, the problems when they come up, they're easy to address, but they're coming up every day, all the time. So you can measure it based on the magnitude of the problem, the magnitude of the headache it gives you, or the number of headaches. This is a personal assessment of, as a manufacturing engineer, how is this affecting you? If you want to talk about headaches that are getting out to customers, or headaches that are measured in different ways, that's perfectly legitimate too. You might want to break headaches out into multiple categories. Your personal headache, headaches getting out to the customer, headaches for your boss, whatever it is. So again, this is a baseline. If you don't really know what else to do with it, just use these 3 numbers. And what you'll do is you multiply your score that you've given for each one of those, for each product you have. So for example, if product A, you gave it a 3 for lifetime remaining, and you gave it a 5 for percent of the business, and you gave it a 1 for headaches, you'd have 3 times 5 times 1, you'd get a score of 15. You do calculations like that, list your products. If I scroll down here a little bit, you can just, I don't have a calculator in here, but pretty simple math. So you basically list your products in and list the scores, and then you can see, okay, what should I work on first, what should I work on second, based on these scores. Again, this is a starting point. You might have, lots of times you will have other input in terms of what you're supposed to be working on, what you should be working on. If somebody comes to you and says, hey, I think we should work on this project over here and work on better method sheets for that, even if it's your boss, you might want to pull the scorecard card out and say, well, it doesn't seem more logical to work on this because this is where the headaches are coming from, this is what's getting to the customer, etc. And again, just because there's more headaches on something or more things getting to the customer doesn't mean that's where you want to put method sheets onto. It might mean you need to focus on fixing specific problems on that. So again, I can't give you a hard and fast, this is how it always is, but I hope I've given you some guidance to get you started on thinking on things more in a more quantified way and making your decisions. Next, what documentation format? Again, this is going to be gone into much more detail throughout this course. I've already hit on why visual methods are so important. You want to review lots of things here. Your company rules for documentation, and you want to recognize rules separate from norms. For example, I worked in one company. They had a method sheet template done in Word. I apologize for using brand names here. Let's say document a word processor. All the documents were done in word processors. So when I was assigned to do new methods, it was suggested that I do it in this word processor because that's what the method template is. That's where it's done. But I found that for doing visuals, it made much more sense to use presentation software. So although the template set a rule, part of that rule is actually just a norm. They used Word not because it's the only software they had available, not because that's the only technical knowledge people had. They were using Word simply because that's what they'd used for a decade. So you want to try to be very careful to recognize what are the rules you're being told to follow and what are just norms or legacy rules that should really be challenged, that you can try to improve on. This is a situation, as with everything else, every company is different, every manager's different, every management style is different, doc control is different at every company. So you have to understand at your company what is optional, what you really have to follow, what you can challenge, what you shouldn't. And sometimes the things that you want to challenge but you feel you shouldn't, challenge them. You might find out that it's appreciated that you challenge them. You might find out you get kicked in the teeth. But more often than not, if they appreciate your input, they'll say, that was good to challenge that. You'll get kudos for it. Next, I want to talk about the needs. Not listed in here on the worksheet, you have the company's needs. The company's needs are kind of an umbrella or a blanket that covers everything else. If you really feel it's necessary to do one particular thing in the method sheets, and it really has zero effect on quality, zero effect on product getting out the door, zero effect on anything else in the company, but it's really important to you for some personal reason. For example, you like the color green and you want all the method sheet templates to be turned green, all the methods to be green. That's a detail you should probably not worry about because it's not going to affect anything. When I'm talking about detail level here, I'm really talking about what the operator needs and what you feel manufacturing quality needs. For example, I don't have my whiteboard camera set up. Let's imagine a situation where you have screws and you're attaching part A to part B using a screw. And you're not specifying the length of that screw. Is it important for the product that that screw has a specific length? In my personal opinion, it's important that every single product that goes out the door is built the exact same way, which means it having the exact same screw length. You might have different priorities in your company or in your culture that says, you know what, as long as the screw's half an inch long, it's going to fit. And if it's not half an inch long, they can't use it. It's not long enough. I don't care if it's half an inch or 2 inches. It's not going to have any effect on what we're building. This is somewhere that I always push for having very specific details on things that other people don't think are important. I have very good reasons for believing that it's important to tightly control every single part that goes into a product that goes out the door to the customer. And I can make that argument and why there's an ROI on doing that, return on investment, on taking that time. What about extra information? This would be like safety warnings or descriptions of why something is important to do. Some of that, such as safety warnings, is very important. Telling people they need to wear gloves, if they need to wear gloves before touching a part, is very important. Telling people the physics behind something and why if they don't do this just right, it could cause this kind of problem. I have an example from early in my career where I was given a method sheet that was 10, 15 pages long of solid text. And throughout that text, there were things such as you need to keep the optic, in this case it was a crystal, you need to keep the crystal in a desiccator, because if you don't, then it will absorb moisture out of the air, and when it absorbs moisture out of the air, it affects the coating on the crystal, where they could, and it was a huge paragraph about what happens when moisture hits the crystal. It could have and should have been, keep the crystal in the desiccator, otherwise the crystal could be destroyed. It should be as simple as that. The operator should not need or care about more than that. I don't care how technical your product is, how involved it is. The operator only needs to know the things that will actually affect what they do. And knowing that they will destroy the crystal if it's not kept in the desiccator is all they need to know. They don't need to understand how it destroys the crystal. If they want to, they can talk to the design engineer and learn. But you want to make sure you keep your method sheets as succinct as possible. The one caveat to that is, if you have a specific purpose for your method sheets where they are not designed for the operator to use normally, they're actually designed for engineers maybe from other product lines that are walking through, to be able to look at the method sheet and understand all those details, then okay, then it's not really an operational method sheet. It's really a descriptive method sheet for the process. I am not going to be talking much about descriptive method sheets for the process. I'm talking about method sheets that are actually used by the operator, whether they're used just during training or they're going to be used on a daily basis. And then process clarity. It is extremely difficult for an operator who's been doing the same job for 10 years or 5 years or even 2 years. If they've been doing it without looking at method sheets, maybe there hasn't been a method sheet, it's extremely difficult for an operator who has been doing the job to recognize all the things that they do just by default without thinking about it. So they might say, the only clarity is needed is just attach A to B. But in reality, when they're attaching A to B, they're trying to make sure that this part's aligned here and this groove is aligned over here. And somebody just coming in to attach A to B will never get it because they don't recognize all those details. So this is why it's so good to have somebody there who is not so familiar with the product. Hopefully, you can extract yourself far enough from the product that you can be an observer of what's going on and just try to observe everything if you are really familiar with the product. I have found that I have closed the most gaps and added the most clarity to products that I was not familiar with, because I was learning for the first time, and so I saw all these things that they would do that I'd say, well, hold on a second, how did you do that? How did you know to do that to this length? How did you know to type, and ask all these questions because I don't understand why they're doing what they're doing. It doesn't mean that when you write the method sheet, you have to tell all these whys of why everything is being done to detail. But obviously you want to understand that, so you understand what level of detail is needed to be put in the method sheet. So that's all I had for today's training. I went way over time, which is going to continue to happen on these trainings. But I hope you got a lot out of it. And I hope to see you next week. And again, I'll have the worksheet posted in just a second. And I see there are no viewers up here at the moment. That's fine. I hope everybody has a chance to see this. I'll be sending out notifications to a few people. Other than that, I hope to see you next week. Thanks for joining me. Bye.